Caitlin Clark is standing on who she is. Meanwhile, her critics are standing on some bullshit.
I think that Caitlin Clark is making a point that I would certainly defend.
Megyn Kelly only believes Santa Claus can be white. She became their vessel to express a lot of the hateful and racist opinions that they had about Black women. She has some very predictable people angry at her because they never were fans of hers.
Certainly there is racism involved and there is white people or privilege advantages being had. I absolutely agree with that.
They just like the idea of weaponizing her success against other Black women who they can't stand.
Caitlin Clark's name has sparked admiration and controversy once again. From being crowned Time Magazine's Athlete of the Year to calling out systemic inequalities in sports, she's become a lightning rod for opinions.
I want to say I've earned every single thing, but as a white person, there is privilege. Not surprisingly, Megyn Kelly then responds on Twitter, she's on the knee all but apologizing for being white.
But now, Jemele Hill has entered the fray, accusing Clark's fans of being fake and even racist.
They were gonna come for her. You saw that when she liked Taylor Swift's social media post where she endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. What's hilarious is watching these people twist themselves into knots because in this Time profile, Clark debunked a lot of the false narratives that they pushed. No, she didn't think she was targeted by WNBA players. In fact, if anything, Clark says she realizes that most of the college competition she faced was substandard, and it took her some time to adjust to the WNBA.
The backlash? Unprecedented. Social media is ablaze, debates are raging, and everyone's asking, why is Hill going after Clark's supporters? Is there truth to her claims, or is this just another chapter of manufactured outrage? Let's uncover what's really fueling this firestorm.
Former college swimmer and right-wing darling Riley Gaines tweeted, "No one was asking for Caitlin Clark to position herself as a right-wing hero. All she needed to do was remain neutral. She's a phenom who inspires countless young girls to play and achieve, so I still have great admiration for her. But she missed the mark on this one."
Jemele Hill's comments didn't come out of nowhere. They were sparked by a series of events that placed Caitlin Clark at the center of both admiration and intense scrutiny.
Well, I guess it could be worse. Caitlin Clark could have said she supports Black Santas.
In Slate, they have a piece on .com, Santa Claus should not be a white man anymore. And when I saw this headline, I kind of laughed and I said, oh, this is so ridiculous. Yet another person claiming it's racist to have a white Santa, you know? And by the way, for all you kids watching at home, Santa just is white, but this person is just arguing that maybe we should also have a Black Santa. But, you know, Santa is what he is, and just so you know, we're just debating this because someone wrote about a kid.
After being named Time Magazine's Athlete of the Year, Clark gave a rare and candid interview that tackled more than just her on-court achievements.
I guess the only way she would have made Megyn Kelly matter is if she came out in support of Black Santas, because we know that Megyn Kelly only believes Santa Claus can be white.
She openly acknowledged her privilege as a white player in a predominantly Black league and emphasized the importance of uplifting Black women who have built and shaped the WNBA.
Not surprising, she would have a problem with Caitlin Clark actually acknowledging the contributions, the sweat equity that Black women have put into this game.
For many, this statement was a refreshing moment of self-awareness from a young athlete in the spotlight. However, for others, especially a vocal subset of Clark's fan base, it felt like a betrayal.
But here's the quote that really pissed off her so-called fans. "I want to say I've earned every single thing, but as a white person, there is privilege. A lot of those players in the league that have been really good have been Black players. The league has kind of been built on them. The more we can appreciate that, highlight that, talk about that, and then continue to have brands and companies invest in those players that have made this league incredible, I think it's very important. I have to continue to try to change that. The more we can elevate Black women, that's going to be a beautiful thing."
Hill pointed out the hypocrisy of these so-called fans, accusing them of weaponizing Clark's success to fuel their own racist narratives. She noted how this contingent latched onto Clark, not necessarily because of her incredible talent, but because she represented a stark contrast to Black athletes like Angel Reese, who was criticized for her brash confidence and unapologetic personality.
Clear they were not fans of women's basketball, but Caitlin Clark became their avatar. She became their vessel to express a lot of the hateful and racist opinions that they had about Black women, about queer women, and about the WNBA overall.
The divide became especially clear during the infamous national championship game, where racial tensions boiled over following Reese's trash-talking gesture toward Clark. Despite Clark herself dismissing the incident as a part of the game, her growing popularity among certain groups seemed to hinge on more than just her skills. It became entangled with race and identity politics.
She knows, like a lot of white players in the WNBA know, and they've said it, Kelsey Plum, Breanna Stewart, is that they get elevated, they get marketed, they get pushed in a way that Black women in that league who have accomplished similar things do not get the same endorsement opportunities, the same marketing.
The issue escalated further when conservative voices like Megyn Kelly and Riley Gaines criticized Clark's comments in the Time profile.
Megyn Kelly tweeted, "Look at this. She's on the knee, all but apologizing for being white and getting attention. The self-flagellation, the, oh, please pay attention to the Black players who are really the ones you want to celebrate. Condescending, fake, transparent, sad."
Kelly mocked her for apologizing for being white and accused her of pandering to woke culture. Gaines, while less incendiary, still suggested Clark should have remained neutral and stuck to inspiring young girls. These reactions highlighted a deeper problem. Clark's fans, or at least some of them, weren't prepared for her to step outside the role they had crafted for her.
Oh, they was mad, heated, hot as fish grease that Clark not only acknowledged her privilege, but she then committed a deeper internal sin. She had the nerve to publicly acknowledge and appreciate the contributions of other Black women. The same Black women, a lot of her fake fans, again, had that hatred for.
When she spoke up for Black women and acknowledged systemic inequalities, it shattered the narrative they had been projecting. This backlash wasn't entirely unexpected. Hill and others had long noted the performative nature of some of Clark's supporters, many of whom seemed more interested in using her as a symbol against Black athletes than genuinely celebrating her accomplishments.
I bet Megyn Kelly ain't even got a Black coffee cup in her house, because that's how much she can't stand Black people.
As Hill put it, these fans never truly cared about women's basketball, or even Clark herself. They were simply looking for a figure to rally behind in their broader culture war, and when Clark refused to play along, they turned on her.
Now, as Clark's popularity continued to explode, those of us with common sense and good observational skills could see the truth. While the majority of people root for Clark because she's a generational talent, there was another loud contingent in the room that saw Clark's success as an opportunity to let off some steam about how they really felt about Black women. That loud contingent is now big mad because it turns out that Caitlin Clark isn't nearly as hateful and unaware as they wanted her to be.
The controversy surrounding Caitlin Clark's remarks also brought to light long-standing issues within the WNBA, especially regarding race, privilege, and marketing.
Earlier today, Megyn Kelly, she was saying that you were apologizing for your white privilege.
I feel like I always have had really good perspective on everything that's kind of happened in my life, whether that's been good, whether that's been bad. And then obviously coming to the WNBA, like I've said, I feel like I've earned every single thing that's happened to me over the course of my career. But also, I grew up a fan of this league from a very young age. Like, my favorite player was Maya Moore. Like, I know what this league was about. And like I said, like, it's only been around 25 plus years. So I know there's been so many amazing Black women that have been in this league, and continuing to uplift them, I think, is very important. And that's something I'm very aware of. And like I said, like, I try to just be real and authentic and, you know, share my truth. And I think that's very easy for me. Like, I'm very comfortable in my own skin. And that's kind of been how it is my entire life.
Yes.
For years, the league has struggled to navigate how to promote itself effectively while embracing its predominantly Black and queer player base. Historically, Black athletes in the WNBA have faced challenges in securing endorsement deals and media attention compared to their white counterparts, even when their achievements are equal or greater.
If I was to point to like aspects of our society where I think certainly there is racism involved and there is white people or privilege advantages being had, I absolutely agree with that.
I think that Caitlin Clark is making a point that I would certainly defend, which is that she is, I think, arguing about a kind of remnant of cultural racism that tends to raise up the achievements of white people and diminish the achievements of Black people, including Black athletes.
Caitlin Clark, being the generational talent that she is, naturally became a marketing focal point, but her rise to prominence also reignited debates about how the league chooses to spotlight its players. Clark's acknowledgement of her white privilege was not an isolated statement, but part of a larger narrative about the systemic inequalities in women's basketball.
In the Time magazine piece, Clark made it clear that she found the racist, misogynistic attacks and homophobic narratives to be upsetting and gross. Those were her exact words.
She noted how black players have historically carried the league, building its foundation and shaping its legacy. Her words echoed sentiments shared by players like Breanna Stewart and Kelsey Plum, who have also highlighted the disparities in opportunities given to black players versus white players.
And despite what her defecting fans have said, Caitlin Clark didn't do that because she felt any pressure or because she's been brainwashed by the woke mob. This is a woman who comes off as very sure of herself and is certain about what she stands for.
These honest and open discussions, however, have often been met with resistance. Many fans, particularly those outside the core WNBA audience, seemed uncomfortable with the truth Clark was willing to address.
Professional players and professional coaches, this is no disrespect to college women's basketball, are a lot smarter. I love women's college basketball, but if you go back and watch the way people guarded me in college, it's almost like concerning. They didn't double me, they didn't trap me, they weren't physical. And it's hard, it's college. A lot of those women will never go on to play another basketball game in their life. They don't have the IQ of understanding how the game works. So I completely understand it. And it's no disrespect at all. They don't have the IQ. You have to simplify it for girls at that age.
The reaction from her detractors, particularly high-profile commentators like Megyn Kelly, further demonstrated how polarizing Clark's remarks had become.
I knew this moment would unfortunately come for Caitlin Clark, who is probably the most unintentionally controversial athlete in professional sports right now.
Kelly's sarcastic jabs about Clark apologizing for being white and her comments about self-flagellation weren't just personal attacks. They were part of a larger cultural pushback against acknowledging racial privilege.
In the NFL, where more than half of the players are black, it is only very recently that the number of black quarterbacks has reached anywhere near parity with the black representation in that league as a whole. And that was to do with racist attitudes that the quarterback was the brains of the operation and therefore it should be a white person.
For people like Kelly, Clark's willingness to speak about systemic issues disrupted their preferred narrative of an apolitical athlete who could be celebrated without challenging any uncomfortable truths.
I think that Megyn Kelly's response is typically mean-spirited and inflammatory, to be honest, but you know I'm not a fan.
I don't disagree that it's a little over the top.
In their eyes, Clark's recognition of the contributions of black athletes wasn't a show of respect. It was a betrayal. As the debate unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just about Caitlin Clark. She had inadvertently become a symbol in a much larger discussion about race, gender, and representation in sports. Her statement shone a spotlight on the uncomfortable realities of how fans, brands, and even the media interact with women's basketball. The backlash wasn't just about what she said, it was about what her words represented. For many of her critics, they were a reminder that women's sports, like any other sphere, cannot be separated from the broader societal issues that define them.
See, she has certainly always had a level of respect and reverence for the pioneers that came before her. I mean, one of the viral moments involving Caitlin Clark was when she finally met Maya Moore. Maya Moore is her favorite player ever.
As Caitlin Clark's star continues to rise, the reaction to her remarks, especially regarding race, privilege, and black women in sports, reveals something far more complex than just a disagreement about words. It's not just about a white athlete acknowledging her privilege. It's about what her acknowledgement represents in a larger cultural and societal context.
This kid's on the wrong team. She's got the wrong skill set to handle the physicality of that league. And she's a rookie, targeted by society, targeted by her looks, targeted by her reputation, targeted by the disrespect that they've shown to the WNBA. She said now they're expecting this rookie class to be perfect. This rookie class isn't even one of the best rookie classes in the last 10 years.
Jemele Hill's accusations against Clark's fans go beyond personal disappointment or criticism of one comment. What Hill is calling out is a deeper hypocrisy and performative allyship. According to Hill, a substantial portion of Clark's fan base, particularly those aligning with conservative viewpoints, are not interested in true support for women's basketball or the sport's diverse athletes. Instead, they have seized upon Clark's undeniable talent as a tool to fuel their own culture war, particularly around issues of race. These fans have applauded Clark's skills, but the moment she stepped outside the narrow confines of the persona they had built for her, they turned on her.
She has some very predictable people angry at her because they never were fans of hers. They just like the idea of weaponizing her success against other black women who they can't stand.
This shift is evident when we look at the national championship game, where Clark's rival, Angel Reese, famously made a gesture that many viewed as trash talk, a form of personal expression in sports. But for some, the incident became a racial flashpoint. For these fans, seeing a black athlete challenge a white one in this way was unsettling, and the outpouring of vitriol directed at Reese made it clear race was at the heart of the issue.
Is Caitlin Clark currently the face of the WNBA? Yes. Do I think if A'ja Wilson dropped a shoe and Caitlin Clark dropped a shoe today at the very same time, that Caitlin Clark would outsell A'ja's shoe by 100 times? Yes.
Clark's fan base, who had eagerly embraced her as a beacon of talent and a symbol of success in women's sports, now faced a dilemma. They had built their narrative around Clark's athletic prowess, but now her outspoken recognition of systemic inequalities forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about race, privilege, and the long-standing inequities in sports.
There is a Caitlin Clark effect on all of basketball, and especially on women's basketball ratings. Kudos to her. She has elevated an entire sport.
If she would not have joined the WNBA, these numbers would not be the way that they are with or without her, right? So it's not about Caitlin Clark not being in the finals or being in the finals. It's the fact that Caitlin Clark is in the league that is allowing other teams to still have these pretty decent ratings in the finals.
What Hill points out is that these fans, rather than embracing Clark's message of racial awareness and inclusion, became offended. They weren't interested in celebrating a player who was growing and evolving, both as an athlete and as a person. Instead, they were more concerned with keeping her within the boundaries of the role they had assigned her, an apolitical, heroic figure who didn't disrupt their narrative.
In March, Clark became the NCAA men's and women's all-time scoring leader. A couple months later, her Iowa team met undefeated South Carolina in the national championship. And while South Carolina won the title, that game averaged 18.4 million viewers. And for the first time in history, the women's national championship game had more viewers than the men. That game also averaged more viewers than any of the NBA Finals games between the Boston Celtics and Dallas Mavericks. In the WNBA, Clark won Rookie of the Year, and her Indiana Fever team made the playoffs for the first time since 2016.
This tension played out in the days following the release of Clark's interview in Time magazine, when she acknowledged the significant contributions black athletes have made to women's basketball. In doing so, Clark made a statement that not only positioned herself as an ally to black women, but also made it clear that she was unwilling to stay silent in the face of systemic injustice. For many of her fans, especially those in the conservative camp, this was the final straw. Megyn Kelly's response to Clark's remarks was particularly telling. Her mockery of Clark's recognition of privilege as self-flagellation is not just a personal attack on Clark, it's a broader critique of the idea that white athletes, or anyone, should acknowledge racial privilege. Kelly's comments dismissing Clark's expression of empathy and allyship reflect the discomfort that many people feel when confronted with the realities of race and privilege. For these critics, Clark's comments weren't just offensive, they were an existential threat to the comfortable, racially neutral narrative they preferred.
Last week, Time magazine revealed its Athlete of the Year, and the choice was Caitlin Clark. Now, I thought the honor was well-deserved. When you look at this year, few, if any, athletes have had the impact that she's had on women's basketball, really on any sport, at both the college and the professional level.
Similarly, Riley Gaines' criticism of Clark for not remaining neutral and sticking solely to inspiring young girls also reveals how narrow and limiting the expectations are for athletes, particularly female athletes who are in the public eye. When Clark dared to speak out on behalf of marginalized groups rather than just focusing on being a role model for young girls, she defied the conventional expectations placed on her. In the eyes of Gaines and others, Clark had stepped out of her lane, and for that she faced condemnation. Ultimately, what this backlash highlights is the extent to which some fans are willing to co-opt athletes for their own purposes, distorting their image into something that fits within their ideological frameworks. When those athletes challenge those frameworks, they are abandoned or vilified. For Caitlin Clark, her willingness to speak out about race and privilege has put her at the center of a cultural storm, revealing the deep divisions that still exist in society when it comes to confronting uncomfortable truths about race, gender, and privilege.
What is she doing wrong? What more do you want from Caitlin Clark? Seriously, what more do you want from her? She's focusing on the game. She lifted her team up, got them to the playoffs, won Rookie of the Year, and then also is denouncing racial tensions when she's asked about it. I'm sorry, I don't see anything more that Caitlin Clark should have done or could have done. Listen, if people want to portray and paint the narrative that there are racial tensions in the WNBA as a result of Caitlin Clark, I would say that's their own problem. I think Caitlin Clark is doing the right thing, rising above all of the crap that she's had to endure. The amount of fouls committed on Caitlin Clark higher than any other player, flagrant fouls committed on Caitlin Clark higher than any other player. Caitlin Clark was worried about playing the game, and that is why she got Rookie of the Year. She was not worried about the BS.
By refusing to play into the expectations of her detractors, Clark has become a symbol not just of athletic excellence, but of the difficult, often controversial conversations that need to happen in sports and society at large. As the backlash against Caitlin Clark continues, it's clear this isn't just about one player or one interview. The controversy over her comments has brought to the forefront long-standing issues in sports, particularly race, privilege, and representation in women's athletics. Clark's supporters, or at least some of them, found themselves on opposing sides when she refused to play along with the narrative they had built around her. And as the lines continue to blur between sports and politics, Caitlin Clark remains a lightning rod for discussions that are much bigger than basketball. Her willingness to speak honestly about race, gender, and privilege has challenged her fans, polarized her critics, and made her a central figure in a debate that goes far beyond the basketball court. The question remains, is Caitlin Clark's rise to prominence the beginning of a larger cultural shift in sports, or is it merely another chapter in the ongoing battle over identity and representation?
In the Indiana Fever, president Allison Barber revealed this request made by Clark during the season. Listen.
After a few away games and all of the sellouts, Caitlin asked the WNBA if they would pay spot bonuses to the away team players. She said, wow, we're making all this new revenue, and I would like the away team to benefit from that. Could they get a spot bonus? So that's the heart of Caitlin Clark. I mean, that's a classy, amazing person.